Imagine like waking up tomorrow and realizing your employer legally owns your personality.
Oh, wow.
Right. Not just your work output or, the physical things you built, but your actual identity.
That is wild.
It really is. I mean, your inside jokes, your mannerisms, the catchphrases you use with your friends. If
Mhm.
you're a creator building a following on TikTok or Instagram right now, imagine the first brand that sponsors you just claiming permanent, lifelong ownership of your entire online persona.
It sounds like the premise of a dystopian sci-fi novel, or at least an incredibly predatory terms of service agreement.
It really does. But this isn't science fiction at all. In fact, this was the standard operating procedure in professional wrestling for decades. And recently, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson made these massive cultural waves when he joined the board of directors for WWE's parent company, TKO Group Holdings.
Oh yeah, that was a huge deal.
Massive. Because as part of that corporate deal, he didn't just get stock options. He legally acquired the intellectual property rights to his own persona. Like he literally legally owns the word jabroni now.
Which is, I mean, that's a profound shift in entertainment law.
Mm.
It completely upends the traditional model where the corporate entity just, retains all rights to the character, regardless of who actually birthed the ideas.
Exactly. And that tectonic shift is exactly why we are so excited to welcome you to today's deep dive. We're exploring the history, the absolute chaos, and the lasting legal legacy of WWE's Degeneration X, or, DX.
That's quite a story.
It really is. And we have a massive stack of sources to guide you through this today. We're pulling from backstage historical accounts of their origins, firsthand perspectives of their infamous tank invasion.
Oh, we definitely have to talk about the tank.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And deep dive retrospectives into the legacies of members like Chyna and Rick Rude. We're also diving into Reddit fan communities to understand how their legacy actually aged over time.
Crucially, too, we are bringing in a comprehensive and just fascinating piece from the Marquette Law Review. It examines how this specific era of wrestling completely scrambled the legal definitions of corporate intellectual property. It basically paved the way for the battles we are seeing today.
Because our mission for you on this deep dive is to understand how a group of rebellious 1990s wrestlers didn't just help win a television ratings war. I mean, they fundamentally blurred the lines between real life and scripted entertainment.
Right, they really did.
They exploited administrative blind spots, they forced management to rewrite the rules, and in doing so, they might have permanently changed the legal boundaries of who owns a pop culture identity.
It's a journey that starts with, backstage politics, manifests in physical rebellion, and ultimately ends up in federal courtrooms and legal textbooks.
Okay, let's unpack this by rewinding to 1997. We need to look at the psychology of the Attitude Era's genesis. Because DX wasn't cooked up in a corporate boardroom by executives trying to, formulate a cool demographic hit.
No, not at all.
If anything, management was actively terrified of what they were doing.
That's a vital context right there.
Mm.
In early 1997, WWE was still trying to operate under the old rules of the 1980s. Clear-cut heroes, clear-cut villains, family-friendly storytelling. But the culture had shifted.
Big time.
Yeah, the audience was cynical. They were actively rejecting traditional white meat heroes. And nobody was feeling the brunt of that tension more than Shawn Michaels.
Oh, man. Yeah.
The sources detail how Michaels was experiencing this organic, unscripted rejection by the crowds. He was supposed to be the fan favorite, right? But he was being relentlessly booed.
Which culminates at SummerSlam 1997. And the psychology of this moment is just brilliant. Michaels is the special guest referee in a championship match between The Undertaker and Bret Hart.
A huge match.
Massive. The tension is palpable. And during the match, Bret Hart actively spits on Michaels. It's deeply disrespectful. Michaels just snaps, swings a steel chair at Hart. Hart ducks. And Michaels accidentally hits The Undertaker, costing him the title.
The brilliance there is the causality. It wasn't a scripted monologue where a character announces they are evil now, what we'd call a heel turn in wrestling terminology.
Right.
It was an accident born out of raw emotion.
Right.
But the fans' reaction to that mistake gave Michaels permission to stop apologizing. He started leaning into the genuine animosity the crowd had for him. He took his real-life backstage frustrations, like the pressure of being the top guy, the shifting crowd dynamics, and he channeled them directly into his on-screen promos.
And he doesn't stay on that island alone either. After a brutal match with Mankind, who newcomers might know as Mick Foley Michaels, aligns with Triple H, Chyna, and brings in veteran Rick Rude as their enforcer.
A powerhouse lineup.
Yeah, but this wasn't just a random assortment of talent thrown together by the booking committee. Michaels and Triple H were already incredibly close friends behind the scenes. They were the core of this infamous backstage group known as The Clique.
Which is really where the blurring of the fourth wall begins. They shared a philosophy that favored raw authenticity over traditional wrestling gimmicks. When they were put together on television, they didn't adopt new characters.
Right, they just played themselves.
Exactly. They simply took their real-life, sarcastic, boundary-pushing friendship and put it on camera. They didn't even have a faction name at first.
I always find that detail staggering. It's like the worst behaved kids in the back of the classroom somehow managing to hijack the school's intercom system.
That's a perfect analogy.
They're just broadcasting their own inside jokes, their own grievances to millions of people. It created this incredibly potent authenticity that viewers just couldn't turn away from. And the way they finally got their name is the perfect example of their entire ethos.
Yeah, it was actually handed to them by their biggest rival. Bret Hart was cutting a promo, deeply frustrated by their antics, and insulted them by calling them a bunch of degenerates.
Just a throwaway insult.
Right. But instead of getting defensive, they embraced it. They spun the insult into armor and became D-Generation X.
Even their signature gestures were born out of that same organic rebellion. The sources note that the famous "suck it crotch chop," which, became a global cultural phenomenon, it wasn't workshopped in some writer's room.
No, not at all.
Shawn Michaels just wore short shorts to the ring one night and started taunting the legendary announcer Jim Ross during an interview. It was just Michaels being a menace to authority in real time.
But that menace was precisely the antidote the audience was looking for. It was a complete rejection of the sterile corporate product.
This organic rebellion, though, wasn't just contained to taunting announcers or making crude gestures. The very existence of DX began forcing WWE management to rewrite the fundamental rules of who got television time, how they were presented, and, well, what the structural limitations of the company even were.
It was a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah, let's look at the mechanics of this, starting with Chyna.
Chyna, whose real name was Joanne Laurer, forced just a massive change. Before her arrival, the role of women in mainstream North American wrestling was severely restricted.
Right.
The blueprint was Miss Elizabeth, someone who stood at ringside, looked concerned, and occasionally served as a prop for the male wrestlers to fight over. They were accessories to the narrative, not drivers of it.
But Chyna wasn't an accessory. She was literally billed as the ninth wonder of the world.
Exactly. Our sources highlight that she was bench pressing 315 pounds. When she debuted as Triple H's bodyguard, she wasn't given a complicated backstory to justify her presence. Her physical reality was the justification.
You just looked at her and understood.
Right. She was so physically formidable that she routinely engaged in combat with the male roster, including massive stars like The Rock and The Undertaker.
The boundaries she shattered are staggering to look back on. She becomes the first woman to ever compete in the Royal Rumble match. She wins the Intercontinental Championship, a really prestigious title that had exclusively been held by men for decades, by defeating Jeff Jarrett.
And the way she won it, too.
Oh, yeah. She doesn't just pin him. She beats him in a good housekeeping match. She hits him with an actual kitchen sink and uses ice tongs on him.
Ice tongs.
I know.
That's it.
She took the derogatory concept of a woman belonging in the kitchen and weaponized it. She forced the entire industry to accept a woman as an undeniable physical peer to the men.
So Chyna is fundamentally breaking the gender and physical boundaries in the ring. But simultaneously, you have Rick Rude in this group shattering the actual structural illusion of the wrestling television business itself.
Yes, Rick Rude's involvement is so fascinating because if you go back and watch those late 1997 episodes, his role seems completely bizarre. He mostly just stands in the background wearing a really nice suit, holding a briefcase. He never takes a bump. He never falls down. He never wrestles.
And that was dictated by hard legal and financial realities. Rick Rude had suffered a severe career-ending back injury years prior. To protect his family and his financial future, he cashed in a massive Lloyd's of London insurance policy.
Makes sense.
But the strict stipulation of that insurance payout was that his in-ring athletic career was over. If he wrestled, he committed insurance fraud. So WWE brought him in on a very loose per-appearance deal just to be an on-screen talker and presence.
which directly leads to November 17th, 1997. This has to be one of the most surreal moments in television history, not just wrestling history.
Well, absolutely.
Because Rude isn't locked down by a restrictive, long-term corporate contract, he does the unthinkable. He appears on a pre-taped episode of WWE's Monday Night Raw, but that very same night, at the exact same hour, he walks out live on WCW's Monday Nitro.
And the detail here is just brilliant.
Yeah, he even shaved his beard for the live appearance. So the audience at home knew instantly that the WWE show they were just watching was taped in advance. He gets on a live microphone on a rival network, bashes Vince McMahon, calls DX a sinking ship, and exposes the entire illusion of television scheduling.
The psychology of that moment for the viewer is incredible. If you were flipping channels, you literally saw the same human being on two different networks, working for two warring companies simultaneously. It completely shattered the suspension of disbelief.
Hold on, I have to push back on WWE management here. You are in the middle of a cutthroat Monday Night War. Ratings are literally a matter of corporate survival. How on earth do you let a guy with that much inside knowledge, a guy who is standing in the ring with your absolute top stars every week, slip through a contract loophole like that? Wasn't that one of WWE's biggest unforced administrative errors?
It was a monumental oversight.
Yeah.
But, it perfectly highlights the chaotic reality of the era. Management was moving at a breakneck pace creatively, trying to keep up with the changing culture DX was ushering in, and the administrative side simply lagged behind.
Yeah.
They were flying the plane while building it. As Jim Cornette notes in our source material, when a performer can no longer physically wrestle, the creative team often loses focus on them. Rude felt his talents were being wasted just holding a briefcase, and because he wasn't contractually chained to the company, he exploited their administrative blind spot and found greener pastures.
That structural chaos continues, though, because DX immediately suffers another massive blow. They lose Rick Rude to their biggest rival. And then, shortly after WrestleMania 14, Shawn Michaels suffers a devastating back injury and is forced into a multi-year retirement.
Yeah, a huge loss.
By all traditional wrestling logic, losing your enforcer and your charismatic leader should have killed the faction instantly.
In any other era, it would have. The writers would have disbanded the group and moved on. But because DX was built on real-life relationships rather than a rigid corporate script, they were incredibly adaptable. Triple H seamlessly steps up into the leadership role, and they immediately reload their ranks.
They bring back Sean Waltman, who had just been unceremoniously fired by WCW, where he was wrestling as 6. He returns to WWE as X-Pac, and the promo he cuts on his first night back is blistering.
It's legendary.
He doesn't recite a scripted monologue. He vents actual real-world anger. He directly accuses WCW executives Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff of holding his friends hostage down in Atlanta. And he meant it so genuinely that WCW actually threatened legal action over the phrase.
That unscripted moment is vital because of the psychological effect it has on the audience. When a performer breaks the fourth wall like that, it makes the viewer feel like an insider.
Definitely.
It makes the audience feel like they're being let in on a secret that the corporate suits don't want them to hear. It injects this massive shot of legitimacy into the group.
They also add Tori and the New Age Outlaws Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, and this expanded, retooled DX launches what I consider the absolute peak of Monday Night War's aggression. We have to talk about April 27, 1998.
The infamous invasion.
Yes. WWE is holding Monday Night Raw in Hampton, Virginia. WCW happens to be holding Nitro just down the road at the Scope Arena in Norfolk. DX decides they aren't just going to cut promos in their own building, they're going to physically invade the competition. They procure an actual military assault vehicle.
Procured, amazingly, by a WWE prop guy named Richie.
Richie?
Yeah, who apparently had the connections to source a working rocket launcher on less than 24 hours' notice.
The visual is just incredible. They dress up in full military gear. Billy Gunn actually puts sticks and branches in his hat for camouflage. Road Dogg has the proc department cut a hole in the top of his Kevlar helmet so his hair braids can stick out.
It is utterly absurd.
And they drive this vehicle right up to the loading dock doors of the WCW arena while WCW is broadcasting live to millions of people inside.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it wasn't just a funny prank.
Yeah.
This was a masterclass in corporate brand positioning and psychological warfare. Well, think about the optics.
Yeah.
Inside that building, you had WCW wrestlers like Kevin Nash and Booker T, who, according to backstage accounts, thought the stunt was hilarious.
Right, they loved it.
Exactly. They wanted to open the loading dock doors and let DX in for the sheer television spectacle of it. But WCW management panicked. They literally called the local police and claimed they were under threat from a militia group.
A militia group. It was 5 guys in cut-off shirts with a megaphone making crude jokes.
Exactly. But by reacting that way, WCW management played right into DX's hands. By driving that tank to the door, DX cemented WWE as the cool, unpredictable, anti-authoritarian brand.
No.
And they made WCW look like a sterile, rigid, paranoid corporate monolith hiding behind locked doors.
Yeah.
It completely shifted the cultural momentum. It perfectly set up DX for their legendary summer feud with The Rock and the Nation of Domination, which culminated in that epic ladder match at SummerSlam '98.
It framed the entire war as the young, reality-based anti-heroes against the out-of-touch corporate old guard. But this is where our deep dive takes a truly fascinating turn. Because DX was the absolute vanguard of that R-rated attitude era, but as the performers aged, and as WWE became a massive, publicly traded global corporation, that rebellious spirit morphed into something totally different.
It really did.
Which brings us to their later reunions and a massive modern-day legal debate.
The transition from counterculture rebels to corporate mascots is, it's a jarring one.
If you read through the Reddit discussions in our source stack, the fan community has incredibly divided opinions on the DX reunions that took place between 2006 and 2009. In 2006, they still retained a bit of that R-rated edge.
Right, there was that famous, highly suggestive backstage barbecue segment with Candice Michelle that felt like classic DX.
Exactly. But by 2009, WWE had fully transitioned into its sanitized PG era. Suddenly, you have DX, the ultimate anti-authority menaces out there, selling branded glow sticks, making corny dad jokes, and doing comedy skits alongside a leprechaun character named Hornswoggle.
The irony is rich, isn't it? The guys who made their name mocking the corporate authority became the top merchandise movers for that exact same authority.
Totally.
But I'd argue that this evolution, even the sanitized PG version, is the perfect bridge to understanding the modern wrestling landscape, which is often called the reality era.
That actually reframes how I view that entire era. Break that connection down for me.
Well, even when DX became a corporate nostalgia act, their original massive success proved a fundamental truth to the industry. Audiences ultimately crave authenticity. They want to see the real person bleeding through the character.
Okay, I see that.
DX laid the philosophical groundwork for today's massive stars. Look at Roman Reigns leaning into his actual, real-life family heritage to become the tribal chief. Look at Becky Lynch, who channeled her legitimate, real-world frustration regarding her spot on the roster to become the man. Or Cody Rhodes.
Yeah, Cody is a great example.
Right. They aren't playing cartoon characters like a wrestling garbage man or a wrestling tax collector. They are presenting their actual real-life selves, just with the volume turned up.
Like a stand-up comedian, Jerry Seinfeld on stage isn't a fictional character. It's an exaggerated version of the real Jerry Seinfeld. And that blurred line makes the findings from the Marquette Law Review in our source stack so incredibly vital to understand.
This is exactly where the legal architecture of professional wrestling clashes violently with its creative reality. Historically, WWE has operated under contracts that claim perpetual ownership over wrestler personas as their exclusive intellectual property.
Right, like owning the names and likenesses of John Cena or the Ultimate Warrior.
Precisely. The standard contracts assign all new IP, which includes ring names, catchphrases, gestures, and character traits developed during employment to the corporation. The company argues they provided the platform, the television time, and the marketing machine. Therefore, they own the character forever, even if the human being portraying them leaves or gets fired.
So, what does this all mean? Let's look at the mechanics of that. If a character is just an exaggerated version of the actual human being, if Cody Rhodes is just being Cody Rhodes, how can a corporation legally claim ownership of that person's actual personality?
This raises an important question, and it's the exact question legal scholars are actively debating. The Marquette Law Review piece suggests that these traditional legacy contracts might actually be procedurally and substantively unconscionable.
Okay, the Marquette piece uses some heavy legal terminology there. Break that down for us. What does it actually mean for a contract to be procedurally and substantively unconscionable in practice?
It boils down to fairness and bargaining power. Procedural unconscionability looks at how the contract was formed. If a 22-year-old independent contractor is sitting across the table from a billion-dollar global monopoly, they have zero negotiating leverage.
Right, you just sign.
Exactly. They sign whatever's put in front of them because it's their only path to television. Substantive unconscionability looks at the terms themselves. The scholars argue that demanding lifelong exclusivity over persona, when that persona is inseparable from the performer's real-life identity, is so oppressively one-sided that a judge might deem it unenforceable.
It's like if NBC claimed they owned the concept of Jerry Seinfeld's personality forever just because they aired his sitcom in 1989. It's claiming ownership of someone's identity just because they brought it to work.
That is exactly the argument performers are starting to make. They are pushing back against the old copyright models and looking towards state-level right of publicity laws to shield themselves.
Right, with publicity. Explain how that conflicts with the copyright claims.
Well, copyright protects a fixed creative work like a script or a logo. Right of publicity protects an individual's inherent right to control the commercial use of their own name, image, likeness, and even their distinctive mannerisms.
Okay, got it.
States like California and Indiana have incredibly strong right of publicity laws. Performers are arguing that you cannot copyright a human being's inherent personality traits.
Which brings us full circle to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Exactly. Johnson's unprecedented move to legally acquire all intellectual property rights to his persona proves that the value of these identities is immense and inextricably tied to the human being. The industry standard has always been that the promotion owns the character. But Johnson, leveraging his massive star power, proved that the old corporate model can be fractured.
So let's recap this incredible, chaotic journey we've been on. We started in 1997 with DX as a group of frustrated, real-life, backstage friends who decided to push the envelope and break all the unspoken rules of their industry.
Yeah, they really rewrote the book.
They forced management to adapt to physical realities with Chyna, they exploited administrative loopholes with Rick Rude, and they evolved into a cultural phenomenon that literally drove a tank with a rocket launcher to their competition's doorstep. And in doing so, they pioneered an era of raw authenticity that completely erased the line between the performer and the persona. They proved that the most compelling narrative you can sell isn't a rigidly scripted cartoon, it's the amplified truth of the person holding the microphone.
Which leaves you with a final, provocative thought to mull over. As I mentioned at the top, we were entering an age where new entertainers, athletes, and wrestlers are building massive, authentic brands on platforms like TikTok and Instagram long before they ever sign a corporate contract. They are entirely self-made.
So true.
So what happens when this highly visible, digitally native generation finally decides to take these legacy corporate IP contracts to federal court en masse? Will the traditional entertainment model of the independent contractor, who signs away the rights to their own identity, survive the digital age? Or will the courts finally decide that human personality cannot be corporate property?
The battles of the future in this industry won't be fought in the ring with steel chairs. They'll be fought in appellate courts over the legal definition of human identity. It seems like that neat, safe little corporate script isn't just in the shredder anymore. The performers are rewriting the entire legal playbook from scratch. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.